Mhm. Wonderful. Well, welcome everyone to this workshop. This is about mastering your literature review with Litmaps and Paperpile. And really excited to be here with you today. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen for a moment so you can see that here we have with us Suzanne from Paperpile and myself, Marina from Litmaps. Um, and so these are both basically literature review tools, and that's why I want to come together and give to you a really useful kind of almost end-to-end workflow about the literature review process and how we can use each of these tools in in our work. So I'll let for a moment just for Suzanne just introduce herself as well, because right now just a heads up, YouTube Live only showing me, so it doesn't get to show both. But please introduce yourself for a moment, if you don't mind.
Hi, everybody. My name is Suzanne O'Regan. I'm Community and Marketing Manager at Paperpile. And just to tell you a little bit about Paperpile, it's for collecting, organizing, and creating citations. And I'll be happy to give you a little walkthrough of the product today and show how you can use it for literature review.
Great. Thanks so much, Suzanne. Sounds great. I'm really also excited to see, a nice in-depth overview of this as well. And I'm sure everyone here is too. So yeah, we're really excited. I'll just go ahead and reshare and we can dive into the presentation today. Wonderful. So we'll kind of go in the order of your literature review process as well as covering some bigger, more theoretical ideas. So we're going to start by looking at literature review as a whole. So if you are a bit newer to research or you're still trying to master that process of what is really required in a literature review, we're going to briefly go over those steps and think about where would, where does Litmaps fit into that and what kind of workflow can we accomplish within Litmaps. And then that's going to transition really naturally into Paperpile because, as Suzanne mentioned, Paperpile is amazing about organizing and, you know, basically putting together a lot of literature review concepts. But that first part of searching, that's the part that Litmaps is going to focus on. So when you're doing literature review, right, you're searching through all this research literature. That's the goal of Litmaps, helping you look and do this, conduct the search, and then trying to do that reading and note taking and so on in Paperpile. So yeah, Suzanne will go over that in great detail, over the key features, and then we'll have a lot of time for Q&A. So throughout this presentation, please feel free to post your questions in the YouTube live chat on the side. If it's not open already, just make sure on the right-hand side you're seeing all this live text coming up. If you'd like to ask any questions, we can even answer them in the chat as we go along. But don't worry if we're not answering them verbally. We will record all of them as we're getting them, and at the final Q&A, we can review them there as well. So yeah, please let us know what you're thinking, and feel free to answer each other's questions as well. Forum's a really great kind of temporary community because everyone here is kind of, we're all looking for the same thing, right? Whether you're a graduate student, a professor, professional researcher, we're all trying to make the best literature review, the most productive research possible. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in because we certainly want to move along quickly and optimize our time here. So for this overview of literature review, I'd like to go over with you the kind of the key steps that we think about when we are doing a literature review. So the very first thing is defining the research question. And this is going to vary perhaps based on what kind of review you're doing, right? This might be to prepare for a research paper you're going to write. It might be that you're writing a paper on the review itself, right? You could be publishing a systematic review. You could be preparing for a new project. But whatever that is, generally the first step is going to be really focusing on whatever your research question and topic is. And that in and of itself can be a challenge. It could be something perhaps an advisor has given you, but you're going to need to even perhaps focus it further. And then, of course, the second step, searching for relevant literature. So that's what we're going to talk about a lot today with Litmaps, but that's going all the way from the very first step of saying, hey, I need to research this topic, and what are all the papers I need to know about, all the articles, all the books, all the resources. That's that search step. And then as I'm doing my search, just because we find an article with really relevant name, it doesn't actually make it perhaps appropriate for us. There's so many things to consider when we're looking at research articles. Where was it published? When was it published? Is it from a reputable journal and so on? A lot of stuff. Was it ever retracted? So evaluation itself can be another step. Then deep into reading and analyzing. That's, of course, probably the real guts of the work today. And something that's we're really getting to the paper pile area, as well as organizing. This is something we're going to see both apps can do, but organizing means, you're going to collect perhaps anywhere. You can maybe collect just a dozen articles on your topic and read them all. It might be hundreds. It might even be over 1,000 articles that you're starting with at the beginning of the process. And so trying to stay organized is another key challenge, and sometimes one that we don't think about until the end, until it's a bit late. So it's key to think about this towards the beginning of the process, going in and trying to stay organized from the beginning. Then, of course, writing up that final paper, introduction, whatever you're using your literature review for, and then citing and referencing all these articles, which really ties in a lot to organization. So this seems like a really nice, clean set of steps, but in reality, a lot of us know, especially if you've done this to any degree, that it's very, very messy. They all mix together. You're jumping up and down between them. As you're reading a paper, you realize, wow, my topic or my question, it's too broad. I need to reevaluate. Or as I'm searching for literature, I'm going to be writing my notes. I'm going to be organizing. So it all happens at the same time and kind of with a lot of jumping between it. And that's why, yeah, today we're really trying to focus on what are the key steps in it and how can we make it easier with certain tools. So before I get any further, I'd love to just take, just 30 seconds or so and hear from everyone that we have here. So I can check on the YouTube. We're having around 100 live viewers, so big warm welcome to everyone. But I'd love to hear really briefly, what are the hardest parts of literature review for you right now? So when you are starting a new review, or if you're working on one right now, or you're anticipating what you're going to be working on the next few months, what's like the absolute hardest struggle that you have when you're approaching this? That's so that we can learn a little bit more about what you have trouble with, and also so that even the others in the chat can see, hey, maybe if you're having a really hard time just finding papers, that's something that's not that abnormal. It's pretty common to have some of the same key challenges. So please go ahead and just take a moment to drop in the chat. What is the hardest part of literature review for you? We'd love to hear it. So we're getting a few responses here. I'll go through them. Thanks so much for participating. It makes it really great to see what you're thinking. Someone said it's not so much about finding literature, it's knowing if the paper is any good. Really key. That's about evaluating the sources that we just talked about. This is also really, it's a big challenge today. Someone also says, especially in the context if they're new to the area. So if I'm brand new to a research field and I find a paper, is this actually the right paper? Is it reputable? Is it reliable? And so on. It's really hard to know. Organizing all the resources, retrieving data from papers, extraction and synthesis, just similar to the previous one. Slaw says collecting a body of work to dig into it deeper can be challenging. Assimilating all the relevant literature. Many people are saying synthesis. So several people just said synthesis of data. That's I mean, it can also mean synthesis of the different papers that you're reading. Handling all the literature available, saying it's overwhelming. Retrieving key insights. So I would say maybe from the top level here, we're getting things like organizing and combining all the knowledge, collecting literature and finding sources, and also evaluating those sources. Oh, wow, so many great things in here. And I'll just do a couple more because these are just so fantastic. But one also saying the hardest part is knowing that you reached saturation. That's a really key challenge. Like, am I done? How would I know if I'm done? This is a really big question. Something hopefully we're going to cover today as well. How do you know when to stop, and finding gaps. So wonderful. Thanks so much to everyone, and feel free to keep posting these challenges as you'd like, and hopefully these are things that we are going to address today and resolve for you to some degree. And if not, then definitely please ask them in the Q&A section, because that's exactly what that's for. Or feel free to post any questions throughout the webinar. So taking a brief sidetrack, because we're about to dive into those exact challenges you all mentioned. We're going to dive into exactly those. But for now, we want to look at these two tools just from the top level, because this is why we're here, right? We have these two tools making this webinar. And so a really common question is like, well, where does when do I use what tool and where does one tool end and the other begin? These are really common questions. So this is an oversimplification. Both of these tools do a lot of things, but when you're thinking about what's the main reason I might use these, we're looking at kind of discovery versus organization. And Suzanne, feel free to yeah, chime in or correct me if it feels incorrect, because obviously Suzanne is our paper pile expert. Um, so for discovery, right, literature discovery, finding papers, think lit maps. That's the main guts of the thing. And when we're thinking organizing, reading, note-taking, all these other things, basically pulling everything together that you know, then you can think paper pile, right? And also as well as reference manager. This should be a keyword maybe in the back of the mind. That's what we're working with here. And so, yeah, these are just the top level things we're looking at with each of these tools. To give an idea of where does one start, when does one end, there's some things that even both do in different ways. And that's what you're going to see with a lot of research tools. Like today, you all might be experimenting with plenty of tools, whether they're AI research tools or just traditional reference managers, databases. You're probably using dozens of tools already. But here's an idea just for these two. What are we looking at? What's the scope? Both are literature review. One's more about searching, one's more about organizing. Great. Now I'm going to hop back into this literature review idea, particularly with Litmaps context, and thinking about those struggles that we just texted or we just had in the chat. This is really great that you guys called out a lot of these already. So things like the process being overwhelming. There's so much literature and getting through the literature. There's too many papers to read, trying to figure out how papers connect. That idea of saturation, like did I miss anything? Did I miss a paper or when am I done? As well as falling out of date. So this is something which you didn't hear yet in the chat, but that could be something as well, right? It's as I'm working on a project, might do a literature review in the beginning. I might not publish that paper until 10 months later. What has happened in that time? So these are great issues and challenges that we can solve with Litmaps. So for this process, we're really just trying to focus on a really simple search strategy. Because the main reason that going through literature is so overwhelming is because we kind of imagine, oh my gosh, there's so much literature out there. All I know is my topic. And how do I get to the important papers? Like that is a kind of a big question mark. And we might start searching in different databases for different keywords, and it can get quite confusing and unclear what's the process. And so the way like Litmaps as a tool can solve this, but also using Litmaps in a particular way can solve this. And that's what I mean by a simple search strategy. Like kind of going in and saying, that's how I'm going to conduct my search. And so you're really boxing it in and making it a simpler process. And it can be much less overwhelming to tackle all that literature. As well as too many papers to read. So this is similar to looking through the literature, that there's just too much out there. The goal here with Litmaps is we want to read only what's relevant. So let's not worry about, even if you're finding dozens of papers on your topic, you maybe don't need to read all of these. You need to find which is the most relevant to read now at this moment. Determining how all the research connects, so like all these different ideas and subtopics, we can figure this out by visualizing the connections between articles on Litmaps. So Litmap as a precursor to what we'll talk about later means literature map. We're visualizing how literature connects. Determining if I've reached saturation, did I miss any papers? Litmaps works by searching on papers. So that's why it solves this problem very well, because we can take, say, hey, I have 20 papers on my topic. I think I'm done. We can take those 20 papers, enter them into Litmaps, and see what are any missing connections or articles that I don't yet know about. It's a really powerful use and a really easy way to see that missing work. And lastly, with staying up to date, we can monitor our Litmaps. So we can get live updates if a new paper comes out that's relevant to our work. So it's similar to saying, did I miss something? Because I'm searching on my existing library, but instead of me doing this, it happens automatically. And that's all that monitor is. It's just automatically checking for me all the time. Hey, is there anything related to my research library? So just a quick level summary here. These are kind of the different steps that Litmaps is trying to address in a literature review. And like I mentioned earlier, some of these are overlapping or they're combining with other tools. And so it's not important that you're doing all of these within a single tool. It's just to say, these are things that we can do in Litmaps, which is most steps, except of course for writing. So we don't do any writing features. other than, yeah, you can take some citations and references out and use them in your own writing. So I'm going to dive now into the tutorial section. We're about 15 minutes in, so I have about 15 minutes to give this kind of live demo, live tutorial of going through Litmaps and doing a simple search. So if you are on a computer right now, you're on your laptop, then go ahead and follow along, only if you'd like, because it's a really great way to just really see exactly what I'm talking about. This is designed that you can follow it exactly as I'm going over it in real time. So if you'd like to follow along and do all these steps for your own research right now, then just open up the browser, go to app.litmaps.com and just set up the free account, because you will need a free account to do a lot of what I'm going to cover today. But just simply a free account will do. Or you can even go, if you go to normallitmaps.com, just click login at the top right and follow that same process. So I'll wait just about, 10 seconds here so I don't distract you for a moment if you'd like to do this login sequence. So yeah, please go ahead. Great. So yes, please go ahead and follow along if you'd like. Otherwise, you can always tackle this any other time, and hopefully that's the goal of this webinar, of course, is for you to just learn about the tool at the top level and apply whatever you need later. So the first step is in this kind of idea of a simple search strategy, and this whole tutorial overall is we're just starting from scratch. So if you already have, or you're halfway through your research project, you already have heaps of papers on your topic, you can bypass a lot of these steps because you can just import the articles you already have. But this idea here is I'm just really thinking, hey, if we're starting from scratch on a new literature review, how would I do that with Litmaps and how can it help me? So starting from scratch, we're gonna go, you're gonna land on your home page and you're gonna have a search bar here. And this is where I can search for my research topic, right? And if we're very new to research, then we can keep in mind that one of the important parts and kind of the often unstated parts of the literature review process is even identifying what to search for. So if you already have a paper to start with, that's a great place. But if not, just identifying those keywords can be its own first step. So knowing, hey, what is my research topic? What are the actual words? So if I'm doing something on, how birds migrate across countries, it may not be bird migration, right? It would be avian migration. It would be like the scientific term. So knowing those keywords is just a side note. That's something to consider here. So searching for the most relevant keywords on your topic, or if you have already a paper, chugging that in there and starting with that. So then the results we get, and this is going to look a little bit like a typical search database. So if you use Scopus, Web of Science, PubMed, even Google Scholar, these are all search databases, right? These are just huge collections of research articles where you type in your keywords and you see your results. And so this section of the application is very similar. It's actually a combination of 3 different large databases. And when you type in your keywords, you're getting those results. But this is this is a part of Litmaps, but it's not the goal. This is how we get to the goal, because the goal, of course, is to visualize literature. So this is just helping us to start by identifying those original key papers that we want to look at. So here at the top, I've typed in some keywords on a topic of like algae degradation and microplastics. Like, can we use algae to process microplastics? This is not my background, so I'm always using example topics for the record. And here I've typed them in and I've searched through the Litmaps database. And here on the left, you're going to get a bunch of results. And you might see a number at the bottom that's like 10 out of 50,000 because it is a search database at this point. So we're not trying to help you siphon or narrow at this point. We're trying to return everything, but the most relevant things first. So in this sense, I can just select 1 or 2 or 3 or a very small number of articles at this step. You don't need to go through and find everything relevant here. You can just start with whatever seems like the most relevant paper. So here, the very first paper I found in the list, it had 89 references, 32 citations, seems to be from a good journal. And I just went ahead and clicked the checkbox on it. At this point, you also can already dive into the paper. You could click on it and click on the name and go to the source paper. But the idea here is I just want to find one or two relevant papers from which to begin my search, because that's how I'm going to kind of enter the literature and search by connection in the next step. But the idea is let's look for papers that look relevant and kind of reputable or well connected. So that's why I say we look at the title, can even look at the abstract, and we want to look at something with we would say a decent citation count, because the idea is if you're starting a literature review from scratch and you don't know anything yet about your topic, you want to kind of enter the field from a place where you can really start to explore the most important papers on your topic and really start learning about it from the highest level. So here I found some relevant paper, here I found another, I just checked both of them. And then if I click explore related articles, this is how we get to what we would say is like the meat of litmaps. So this is here a lit map. It's a literature map where we used our two input articles from the last step, these gray dots, and search for relevant connected literature. And as a side note, as I mentioned earlier, if you already have your literature library, you have your papers in Zotero, EndNote, Paperpile maybe, or any other place, this is also where you can just directly upload those. So you can skip that last step and just go ahead and upload what you have, and they would come out all as these gray dots on the map with these light blue dots as paper suggestions. So these are new articles that you didn't yet know about that are deeply connected to your research. And if there are questions about the algorithm, I can cover them more deeply in the Q&A. But at its core, this is searching based on the most relevant papers based on the citations and references of the input papers. So that means we're not using like AI or anything like that in this particular algorithm. It's just using connections. But because connections are so powerful, you end up getting really great and relevant papers a lot of the time. So, and as a brief note here, how is this map laid out? It's visually laid out so that you could visually identify what is more important for you right now. So on the x-axis, we have date of publication. That's saying, articles that are published more recently are going to come out towards the right. And the citation count along the y-axis. So articles are sorted from bottom to top based on how many citations they have. And what this means is you often get a literature map that's a bit diagonal in shape, because the older a publication is, it tends to have more citations because it's been around longer, it's had more time to accumulate these citations. And often, if we're brand new to literature review, we actually can focus our eyes just at the top left of this map to already identify what are some really great salient or important works in my field that I can start reading right now. So we of course can start with the articles we already inputted. We can read these too. But at the top left here, these are going to be, really high impact papers relevant to my topic, because we can see by these lines they're connected to my paper. And we can see by where they are along the y-axis, they're highly cited. So if I'm new to a topic, this is honestly a really good place to start. On the flip side, if you're already, say, you've already collected lots of literature, then you can bring your eyes even down here towards the bottom right. So we're looking at much newer work, like what is the newest trends in this research and the most recent published work. And these light blue dots, this is the same thing you're going to see in the left sidebar here. These recommendations are, they're showing the exact same thing. So these are the same recommendations you see on the map here. If we click on any article on the map, so here I've clicked on this example article, you get to see its article details, and this is where you get tons of information. We can already see a little promo here of the Paperpile button, which I'll get to in a little bit. But here we have all the info about a paper that we could want. So we're looking at its title, its abstract, as well as what journal it was published in, authors, and so on. Yes, and I can jump ahead a bit here. So this is just to annotate what are we looking at here when we look at a paper, as well as this PDF button. So this is a new feature that's just nice to call out here, that if I click on PDF, if it is something I have access to either as an open access paper or through my institution using LibKey, then I can just read it immediately. So what this means is if it's open access and you click PDF, right away you can read it. Easy. Otherwise, if it's behind a publisher paywall, which is outside the scope of Litmaps, that's something you're going to come across that whether this paper was in Elsevier or PubMed or wherever, if it's behind a paywall, it's just behind a paywall. It's just how it is for everyone. But what you can do is you can check if your institution uses what we call libkey. So it just all happens automatically in the app. You can click PDF and it'll tell you, hey, here's how you can check. And if your university is covered by this, you can automatically, basically log in through your university and read the paper. So that's a pretty useful little feature we have now. Let me hop back to this iterative searching. So we kind of have looked at how we start a search, input some articles, read about their descriptions and see if they're relevant. And then in this example, perhaps I'm reading this suggested paper and I'm like, wow, actually, yeah, it's extremely relevant to my topic. The next step is to essentially do two things at the same time with the same button. And so one is to save it. We want to save this paper, right? We want to stay organized ahead of time. And the other is to now expand our search. So we don't want to keep searching on just these two input papers. We want to search on everything we know. So if I click more like this on that paper, I essentially add that paper to my set of known articles or the articles that are saved to my lit map, and I can iteratively grow it. So here you can see instead of just these two gray dots, I now have 10. I have about 10 articles that I know on my topic, and I can keep adding them and saving them as I go. And every time I do that, there's a little refresh button, and I click it to just automatically recalculate what are the newest suggestions now based on my curated collection. And that can be really important because as we're searching, the more you know about your topic, the more papers you've collected and you can hone in on your specific niche, then the more relevant these suggestions get. Because as you can see here, this on the right-hand side, these input articles in the middle and suggested articles in the outer ring, you can see it's not just one line that connects one suggested article to one input article. There's like a lot of lines going on, meaning that this article, for example, it's connected to about 6 other articles that I already know. So this interconnection is what makes it even more relevant to my topic because they're all citing and referencing one another. And here's just what it looks like in the application. So if you're in the app now playing around with Litmaps, go ahead and look at your sidebar and see if you can find any relevant article by looking at its name and the details. And if it seems relevant to your topic, click more like this and then hit refresh. And you'll see the map repopulate with new suggestions based on your newly formed set of input articles. Cool. And we have a few minutes left to keep talking about Litmaps. So I'm going to review briefly some other features here. So we're doing the search. We've covered this in great detail, but we also do a bit of other things. So we do a bit of organization and a bit of these other steps that we mentioned earlier in the literature review. And so one of those is how do we stay organized with Litmaps? So this is what the tagging feature is about. And this is useful for both kind of categorizing things, like putting different papers into different buckets and subtopics, as well as that visual thing. So if you are really consider yourself a visual learner, visual person, this is where you can use that skill to view your literature by these different collections. So you don't just need to keep them in different piles, but you can actually visualize this all on the literature map. And what I mean is you can end up with something like this. So all these papers have been tagged with their different subtopics. And now we can connect this, like we know obviously by this legend, what is what. And this we can use to almost infer things. So I have other examples of maps where you can see kind of how papers are maybe clustered more naturally. You could see over time, perhaps this one subtopic became really popular in research. We might see more, say, purple dots in this section saying, oh, this research was getting really popular in the, 2015 era, and then things changed. So this is one of the uses of tags. So it's not just to keep track of all the different papers, but also if you're liking this visualization aspect. And lastly, we talked about staying up to date. So this is checking, basically, this is what I mentioned earlier with, hey, once I finish my literature review, how do I know if anything new comes out? Or if I'm writing up my paper months later, how can I be sure, did I miss anything back then? Is there anything new that has been released? This is how we check. So it's a really simple single button. So on any literature map, if you're on the app now, look towards the top of the screen and you'll see what says monitor. And if you click on it, you'll be taken to the monitor prompt and you can click enable monitor, and that's all you need to do. So the map itself will now be monitored in Litmaps, and every week or every month, depending, I think for free users, it's every month. Every month, we will run this map through the search algorithm and check if any new papers have come out. And so the Litmaps database itself is updated weekly with some hundreds of thousands of new papers. So there's a huge amount of literature released every single week, every single month. And from among this new literature, we see, is your research connected to any of it? And if so, you just get an email letting you know. And that's just a side note that, yeah, we have also a free and a premium product. So on the premium lit maps, these can be increased in frequency that you can get them every week instead of every month. And I also see there's a lot of great questions coming in. I can respond to these in the chat and as well as in the final Q&A section. So that way we could definitely have enough time for Suzanne's presentation. So thank you for those and certainly feel free to keep dropping them in. So as the final steps here in the literature review, citing and referencing work, we can also do a bit of this in Litmaps. So if I'm searching and I find a relevant paper, I'm like, great, I just want to drop this into my paper. We can use the citation icon at the top of the paper details and copy the different styles. You can also export papers as BibTeX, RIS, CSV, and so on in groups as well. And that's what this page is about. So looking at all of the articles on my Litmap and basically exporting them and saving them. And this is where we're going to get into now the Paperpile connection, which is, oh, sorry, it's going backwards here. Which is about reference managers in general. So reference managers is kind of a whole branch of tools that help you to stay organized, right? Because as you maybe you're doing this research project, you have hundreds of papers, but your next research project, you also might have even more, but they're connected. And so continuously keeping your research library organized as you continue your projects is really useful. And most people tend to end up using one or many, there's many tools out there, but these are some of the most popular tools today. There's Zotero, Mendeley, EndNote, and of course we have Paperpile. And so these are just ways of keeping track of all the different papers you're looking at, as well as making it really easy to format them into different things for your final publication. And all of these integrate, or they can, all the articles you're using here, you can easily put into Litmaps in different ways. And the two easiest ones are Zotero and Paperpile because of special integrations that these tools have with Litmaps. So this is just a note that if you're using these, it's just like extra easy to keep them synchronized with your Litmaps account. So here on the Litmaps app, there's this import button, and that's where you can drop in any file. So exporting from basically anywhere, if you have a common file format for your papers, you can put them into here. But for these two in particular, for Zotero and Paperpile, it gets even easier. So for Zotero, this is another reference manager. You can synchronize it with Litmaps. So by connecting your Zotero account, it just updates and keeps your tags and your Zotero collection synchronized at the same time. And more relevantly for today even is the Paperpile integration, which Paperpile created. And here you can see that's the button we saw a sneak peek of earlier, which is under the title of any paper in Litmaps. Once you have this integration set up, you have the Paperpile button. So all it is when I find something relevant and I want to keep track of all of my papers in Paperpile, I just click this button and boom, it's saved and it's super easy. Here it'll be showing saved to your library. And so I'll quickly walk you through the steps of how to set up this integration. And this is showing, for example, this is all the articles on a single Litmap. They're in the same tag. That's why they're all blue. This marine turtles tag. And here in my Paperpile library, I can see I've also categorized them in the same folder, and they all show up here as well. So it's an easy way to stay organized and kind of synchronized between these two apps. So the way we set this up is by downloading this Google Chrome extension. So maybe Suzanne will also talk about this in more detail, so I can kind of go through it a bit briefly. But this works in Google Chrome, so a specific web browser, downloading this extension, and then, yeah, and that's literally all there is to it. And then once you have that, this button will appear within Litmaps. So it's a really simple, basically one-step process to test it out. So we kind of covered these key steps of literature review using Litmaps. And I just have one more thing to share before I pass it on over to Suzanne, who's going to go into great detail on a lot of these later steps as well for PaperPile. And that is a special webinar promo code. So don't worry if you don't have this written down or you forget, I will email it at the end of the webinar, as well as a special PaperPile promo code. So both tools will have a special promotion after this webinar, but and they're both for 20% off. So this is the one for Litmaps, Lit Review 20 in the checkout process. And just as a side note, if you're from like, I don't know, about 70 different countries, they qualify for low and middle income country discounts. So the prices you see here, this is, I guess you could say, US dollar pricing, so prices in the United States. But if you're in other countries, this might not even be the best coupon for you, and you will automatically see your country pricing. So just as a note, Litmaps does country-based pricing. So at this checkout page, just keep that in mind that this may not be the price you see. It might be lower depending where you live. So now we kind of gave a sneak peek of how Litmaps and PaperPile can connect, and we're going to dive into this PaperPile presentation by Suzanne. I'll go ahead and stop sharing and yeah, pass it on to her. And thank you so much, Suzanne, also for being here and letting us do this fun collaboration. I think everyone is really excited to see it.
Yeah, thank you, Marina. I'll start by sharing my screen. So let me do that first. And we'll get set up. Okay, so can you all see that?
I think so. I think it looks good.
Okay, great. So yeah, thank you for joining today's webinar on mastering your literature review with Litmaps and Paperpile. I'm Susanna Regan, and I'm excited to walk you through how Paperpile can support your literature review process. So what does Paperpile help you do? Put simply, Paperpile is a modern reference manager that helps you collect, organize, and cite your research. It helps you store relevant references and stay organized so you can easily write up your literature review. With Paperpile, you can manage your research library right in your browser, access your PDFs and notes from anywhere, and create citations in Google Docs, Word, and LaTeX. Before we dive in, if you're not already using Paperpile, you can start a 30-day free trial anytime. So you can try everything yourself that you see today for yourself. And at the end of the webinar, I will give you a discount code for a 20% off a 1-year personal subscription. So as researchers, you often face a mountain of literature that can quickly become disorganized, especially when writing a literature review. Keeping track of references, PDFs, and notes is challenging. So today we'll see how Paperpile makes this daunting process manageable, organized, and productive. So let me show you how that will work in practice using an example of writing a literature review about bumblebee interactions with climate change. We'll start with a quick tour of the Paperpile interface so you can get familiar with where everything lives. So once you start a free trial, if you decide to do that now, you won't see what I'm showing you here. This is a populated library. You'll see a blank space. But once you add your own references into the library, which I can show you how to do, you'll see you might end up with something like this. So right in the center, you'll see the main list of references that you've saved to your library. So this is where all your references are displayed. Each row represents a reference in the library. Notice that they are sorted by date added by default. You can quickly scan titles, see whether PDFs are attached, and view authors, journals, and the date published as well. If I click on the 3 dots button next to a reference, that will open up the reference details where you can see the metadata identifiers like URLs and DOI, and the date you added the reference. You can also view the abstract. So if I click the abstract button here, it opens the abstract if the reference has it. Click on the paperclip to see any attachments. And you can, if you have any notes attached, they are in a speech bubble. So I click that there. Clicking on the PDF button opens the PDF in a separate tab. So this is very convenient for literature reviews because you have everything in one place. So next I'm going to show you our left-hand sidebar, which is your main organization hub. So Paperpile allows you to organize references with folders, labels, and stars. So you'll see starred references. So these are any references with a star next to the title. So in Paperpile, you can quickly star any important references, things perhaps you might want to go ahead and read later, and they will appear in the starred list. Folders, on the other hand, are great for organizing projects. So you might decide to organize by a manuscript, or if you're writing a thesis or dissertation, you might have a thesis folder, and within that thesis folder, you might organize by topic or by chapter, as I've done here. And then for other organization, we have labels. And these are used to tag references by topic. So for example, if I want to view references that I want to read next, so say I've labeled these references with read next, but I also want to view ones that are about ecology. So some of these have the label ecology. All I need to do is select read next, as I've done here, and hold down the shift key and select the label I want. So here I've selected ecology, and I can see that there are 2 references that have those 2 labels in my library. So labels are just a nice, convenient way of organizing by topic if that's how you would prefer to organize your references. So next I'm going to show you the top toolbar. So when I select a reference, which I just clicked the checkbox next to the title, the toolbar at the top appears, and this allows me to organize references and work with references in different ways. So it contains a few important tools and shortcuts. So one thing I can do is create a new folder here. So in this case, because we're doing a literature review, I'm going to create this new folder, literature review, and it automatically appears with this reference inside in it because I had selected it. I can also add labels. I can edit the reference metadata if I need to. I can copy citations to the clipboard in a variety of formats. And if I want to share references with collaborators, I can just click the share button and I can create a private sharing link that I can share with others. On the right-hand side here, you'll notice the filter menu. And this is where you can view information about references in your library at a glance. So for example, I might want to filter by what papers have PDFs in my library. And I might also like to filter if they have a folder, if they have a label, if I've decided to organize that way. Or I can also organize or filter by reference type. So for example, if I want to view review papers that have PDFs, I've selected those 2 filters in the filter menu. And particularly if you're writing a literature review, very often one way to start is to perhaps find some big review papers in your field because they tend to give a lot of background information, a lot of background references, and maybe also state some of the key open questions in the field. So in this case, I might just choose some of these papers related to climate change that are review papers, and I can drag and drop them into my literature review folder, which now has 4 papers in it. Your library is also fully searchable. So let's just show you how that works. So you'll notice the search bar at the top and the search options. So you can restrict your search to specific fields like title, author, year. You can decide to include in your search abstracts, notes and annotations, and the full text of PDFs. So that's any text that's mentioned in a PDF. And let's just show you how that works. I'm going to just search for RNA. And by default, they're sorted by relevance, but I can change that sorting. And say if I sort by date published, I can organize my search results in that way. You can also do quick lookup of authors, journals, labels, and folders. So for example, as your library grows, the number of folders that you may create or the number of labels you create may become extensive. So our quick folder or quick lookup feature helps with that. So let me just type in the name of an author, and you can view all of the papers in this library by this author. So over here on the top left, you'll see the add button. This gives many ways of adding references to Paperpile. So one way is to upload files. So you can import folders of PDFs, bibliographic files like BibTeX and RIS, and so on. You can search online, paste in identifiers, or import from other reference management programs. And when you start, if any of you have started the free trial, the first thing you're going to see when you start Paperpile for the first time is that you will be prompted to install our extension. So our extension helps you to download PDFs, write in Google Docs, update references, and it also integrates with websites and databases like Litmaps. So you do need to install it to get the full use of Paperpile. So when Marina showed her presentation, she showed those Paperpile buttons in Litmaps. To get those buttons appearing in Litmaps, you need to install the extension. So here I have it in Chrome. We do have the extension in beta for Firefox and Safari as well. And because this is a Chrome extension, it actually works in every Chromium-based browser. So if you use Microsoft Edge or other Chromium-based ones like Opera, Vivaldi, Brave, this extension will work. So another thing that the extension helps with is, so for example, if you're on a journal website, you can use the extension, which is the P button, to save references to your library. So in this case, I've selected this paper. I want to save it to Paperpile. I want to save it to my literature review folder. And I can do that with the extension pop-up here. And it automatically appears in my library. So that's the Paperpile interface at a glance. In the next section, we're going to start using these features as part of a real literature review workflow. So the first thing I'm going to do is find relevant papers efficiently with Litmaps. So here I've got keywords related to my topic on bumblebees and climate change. And you can see here there's a list of references. So I'm going to just pick the first one here and select that select the reference, and I'm going to explore related articles on a lit map. So it generates this nice lit map here. And as Marina said, papers towards the top have more citations, whereas ones towards the bottom, or at least ones towards the right of the UI, are more recently published. So we can start adding some to Paperpile. So for example, I might just say choose this one, and notice that the Paperpile button is here because I have the extension installed. So that one looks like a good one to use. I'm going to make use though of Litmaps organization tool of tags, which are analogous to Paperpile's labels. So I've already created this tag called climate change. So I can easily find these papers again if I want to look at them. So if I scroll on the list here, I can easily add this climate change tag to some of these papers. So let me quickly do that. And I'm choosing based on citations, but also just choosing based on journal titles. So some of these are well known in the field. And I've added a few now to this tag. So let's view these references within the tag. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import these to Paperpile. So I can just export them as a bibliographic file. So in this case, I'm going to choose RIS and import that RIS file into Paperpile. So download that and go back to my library. And I'm going to import these files into my literature review folder. So let's choose the folder, or sorry, the RIS file. And because I have the literature review folder already open, it's automatically populated the upload to field with the literature review folder. But I'm also going to create a label here analogous to my tag in Litmaps. So that way I can find the references in two different ways. I can go to the folder, but I can also just look at the label climate change. So we'll upload these, and you'll see that some of the references have been imported, two have been skipped. That's because they must be in my library already. But here they are. And I'm going to just look at the climate change label here. And I'm just going to change its color so I can easily find it later. And I'm going to pin it to the top of the list so that I can easily find it. So pin labels would show at the top of the list. So coming back to my label here, because I imported an RIS file, like PDFs aren't automatically saved. So let's just select one of these references, and notice this add PDF button appears where I can find the PDF online. So this will download, and if you're connected to your institution, it will download the PDF from your institution's library. Otherwise, it will download it from elsewhere. So I've now downloaded this PDF automatically, and I can open it and read it. So just to come back to literature reviews, so I'll go back into this folder, and we've got a bunch of different papers in there now. And again, depending on your field, you can choose many different ways to organize your literature review. So, if it's a literature review for the first chapter of your PhD thesis, generally you want to give an overview of the field, and you want to connect to the research questions that you're going to deal with in your dissertation. So the way you might organize your thoughts in Paperpile is you can create some subfolders. And I'm just going to quickly create some ones for an introduction. And I noticed there's the topic of thermal thermal tolerance is coming up here quite a bit. So I think that should be a subfolder. That's a topic I want to delve into in my reading. And geographic range is another important topic. So let's just create a few of these just to give you an idea of how you might approach your organization of your references for your literature review. So everything is organized instantly and ready for review. So for example, I might decide to put in just by dragging and dropping, I can just insert them that way, or I can just again select some of these and use the folders. You see these subfolders have appeared and populate them in that way. And so you can see that the sidebar has updated here. Okay, so of course, with literature reviews, collecting and organizing references is crucial, but so is active reading. So that's where Paperpile's PDF viewer comes into play. So here I'll just open a PDF and just quickly show you around our annotation tools. So for a literature review, it depends on how you choose to read papers. For example, some you're going to read very deeply because they relate to your research question. Others you may skim, where you might read the introduction, read the discussion, look at the results, if it's a scientific paper, and skim the figures and understand generally what the authors did, and then you then try and connect it with your work or other papers you have read. So again, you're trying to synthesize your thoughts and ideas and draw conclusions from what you're reading. And I think like a good way to do that as you're trying to create these conclusions is to annotate PDFs and make some notes as you go. So in other words, here I'm going to write down, this is a key finding of this paper. And I can highlight it and view it there. I might also want to examine this figure here more closely. So I'm just going to draw a rectangle around it and note that this is important and something I want to maybe go back and look at later. And if I view the discussion, because again, often discussions have some of the most important points summed up. So in this case, it's a conclusion. You know, they basically summarize what they did. And we can say maybe use highlight there and maybe change it to a different color because I want to emphasize that this is a conclusion. So maybe color coding your annotations is a good idea. And notice that all the annotations and my notes are appearing in this side panel so that you can easily find them later and work with them. So after reading a paper, you know, you might decide then to make a note of it in your library. So in this case, we were reading the paper by Mabe. So it was this one. And actually, it wasn't that one, but it was something with a very similar title. But anyway, supposing I've read that one, and I will just go to put in, you know, a note that this is an important case study. So again, at a glance, I can see whether these references have notes, and I can view them in my library. So annotations are saved instantly, and they are synced across devices. So for example, we do have mobile apps. So any annotations you make on a PDF in our web app that I'm showing you today, those will also appear in our mobile apps and vice versa. So once you've read your papers in depth, the next thing you want to try and do is start writing up your synthesis. And when you're ready to write, Paperpile will integrate smoothly into your preferred writing environment. So here I'm going to demonstrate that with an outline document I've prepared in Google Docs. So just to remind you, Paperpile has a plugin for Word, And we also integrate with LaTeX and BibTeX. So I think an outline document is a good way of starting to put together your ideas and thoughts for a literature review, because it's helping you build a rough first draft as you go, and helps you overcome the blank page. So in this case, in my outline document, I have titles for each subsection that I'm going to cover in the literature review, and I've sketched out some bullet points under each one. And in this case, like, we can maybe, again, there's many ways to do this. I would be sketching out thoughts and ideas. So for example, here I have a quotation from a paper. And because it's a quotation, I've made sure to insert quotation marks around it. So to avoid misattribution and make sure that I remember I did not write this myself. So very important to do that. So for example, here with this paper that we've been reading, I might just want to make a note of this piece, that one of the things that's important here is the extreme temperature variability and this response to short extreme thermal events. So I want to make a note of that and plug that into my document. So try and do that. So again, I'm going to put that here. And I have my quotation. So again, to make sure that I remember what source that comes from, I'm going to create an in-text citation with the Paperpile extension. So the Paperpile extension creates the Google Docs plugin, which inserts a Paperpile menu into Google Docs. And it also inserts this P button to help us insert citations. And that way I won't forget the source. So this idea that I think is important for my literature review, if I then type in the author's name, this was the paper in 2021, and we can insert that here. So in Google Docs, it will initially appear as a blue placeholder. So if I go down here to the bottom where I have my reference list, notice the reference has not appeared there yet. But if I go and click Format Citations, this will create the citations for me. So it'll create the in-text citation and it adds it to the reference list. So you can see it here. This paper by Mabe and published in 2021 is here. So if I want to edit that, I can just click the pencil and I can type in any other papers I want to cite. So these are items from my library that will appear. And I can click Reformat Citations. So one last thing I want to show you is that, of course, as you begin to finalize your document for your thesis or for a manuscript for publication, you might need to change the citation style. So Paperpile comes with a variety of citation styles. Here I'm just going to show you how we'll change to a numerical citation style. So I'm going to pick Nature and click Update, click Reformat the document, and these citations will change into numerical citations. Okay, so just to finish up, so that ends our session. That brings us to the end of our guided session. So today you've seen how Paperpile can reduce the stress and complexity of managing a literature review by providing efficient collection and organization tools, seamless importing from Litmaps and other sources, robust annotation and note-taking features, and easy citation creation with Google Docs and in Word as well. So remember that you can try out everything that I showed you today with our full featured 30-day free trial. No credit card is needed. Just head to our website and sign up to get started right away. And if you like what you see, you can get a 20% off a 1-year personal subscription with the coupon code PaperPile20 that I can share, or Marina can share in just a moment in the chat. So I'd love to open the floor to your questions, and thank you very much for your attention.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Suzanne. That was fantastic and such a wonderful overview of the whole paper pile process. And thanks so much for that. And thank you everyone for continuing to listen and for your questions and comments. There was some activity as well as you were speaking, Suzanne. So thank you all for that. And as Suzanne said, yeah, we're happy now to dive into a Q&A to answer any and all of your questions, whether it's about Litmaps, Paperpile, literature review, or somewhere in this intersection. We have about 20 minutes for that, so we're very keen to get started. And I can say even, Suzanne, that there was a couple of questions coming in while you were speaking that we could start with right now. So I noticed that someone asked if, I guess you as in Paperpile is planning to allow export. Oh, sorry, this is about the map. So maybe it's actually about Litmaps. But sorry, someone was asking, are you planning to allow exporting the map to a BibTeX file? I'm not sure if that's about something you were covering there.
I did actually show that you can do that in both Litmaps and Paperpile. So for example, here, if I wanted to export those tagged articles, sorry, can you see that? Can everyone?
Yes, can see it. Yeah.
You can choose BibTeX here. So for LaTeX users, you can straight away start working with a BibTeX file from Litmaps, and Paperpile allows that too. So just to show you, for example, if I wanted to take my folder and export it to BibTeX, I can do that.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that's exactly their question. Thanks so much, Suzanne. Yeah. Great. And someone asks, this is also for you, why, or perhaps what are the different reasons that Paperpile would be a better choice than Zotero?
So that will depend on your own personal preferences. So Zotero has a lot of third-party plugins. And for example, if you want to do advanced things with LaTeX and BibTeX, you need the better BibTeX plugin and to download that and get it to work. One thing that Paperpile offers, so firstly, all of our features are in the app. So say when you try your if you do the 30-day free trial, you can use everything straight away. But one thing that we offer is we actually have Google Drive integration. So if I go here to settings, I can set up a Google Drive integration, which means that say I can, not only do I store everything within the web app, I can also back it up to Google Drive. And you don't need a third-party plugin to use that feature. And it's also opt-in, opt-out. You don't need to use the feature if you don't want to, but it is a convenient way of backing up all of your references and their PDFs. So that is definitely one difference from us compared to Zotero. As far as I understand, Zotero, you can do that, but it does require a third-party plugin that I'm not 100% sure is being maintained at this moment. So another thing I actually forgot to point out is another thing that we do differently is we do have, just like with Litmaps, we've seen that did those website and database integrations. So that will, in all of these different academic databases and websites, if you have the extension installed, the Paperpile button automatically appears and you can save papers as you go. So that would be another difference compared to Zotero's web clipper. But yeah, it just depends on what on your own personal choices and what you prefer. So yeah,
Mhm.
both are good options.
Wonderful. That's great to know. I think that really covers it very well. And yeah, I think that's often the case with various tools that it's very case by case and what kind of research you're doing and various things like that as well play in. I think there was one more. This one was coming in as well from Pamela. She asked, what are Litmaps advantages over Connected Paper, Research Rabbit, or Cite? So very similar, kind of comparing tools. So comparing Paperpile to other reference managers, comparing Litmaps to other similar tools you can see on the market, but these are all essentially free or freemium tools. So with Connected Papers and Research Rabbit, Pamela, these are really directly comparable to Litmaps. So in a way, they're all search kind of visual literature search tools. So using visualizations to help you search for literature better. The core difference between Litmaps and the other two tools are simply kind of the span of the literature review process that we try to address, as well as customization features. So I just mean to say, with these other tools, you can search on papers, explore citation networks, see connections. These are all what we have in common. But what Litmaps also tries to do different is to kind of cover a bigger part of the literature review process, right? So we're doing that search, but we're also doing categorization using tags. So keeping track of your collections and organizing, as well as this different integrations. So how you can click PDF and be taken to that PDF immediately, or um, having a more advanced search option. So searching on a collection of papers and being able to filter various things on that. I didn't even cover the filters. Litmaps is also the only tool, period, I think, that lets you change the search algorithm. Also didn't have time to cover this, but if you were on the app, you have your map, you have your suggested articles. At the top of the suggested articles, you have something called filters and algorithm, and anyone can change the algorithm. So even as a free user, you can play around with different search algorithms. So in a nutshell, I would just say that that's the core difference between Litmaps and virtually all other search visualization tools. It's just like covering more of the literature review, trying to do many, many steps here, trying to help you kind of go end to end as well as with something like Paperpile or Reference Manager. And yeah, that more advanced customizations, deep dives, and advanced features. And some great comments here as well. Yeah, if you all have experiences with these other competing tools, or not competing, but comparable tools, whether they're reference managers or things like Litmaps, yeah, feel free to drop them in. There's some great feedback here as well. That's someone shared that, PaperPal was much better for them for collecting PDFs than Zotero. So that's really great feedback, because each of these tools are doing many different things. And so knowing the different niches that they're better at for your needs is really helpful for everyone else as well.
Yes, I've noticed a question in the chat from Andy Frass. I'd be thrilled if you could export the markdown files for any annotated paper so I can pull it into my Obsidian setup. So we we have a partial solution to that. It's not an automatic solution, but just to show you, if you click export here on the annotations page, you will see that markdown is an option and for export, and you can copy and paste into your Obsidian if that is useful to you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Um, yes, and I think there's a couple more questions coming in. So yeah, please feel free to continue asking questions about anything we covered or anything else that you're curious about with literature review process. But we have another one from Shishay, who's asking the cost of Litmaps after the 20% discount. It's a great question, because with all these tools, I mean, the pricing is so different. It can be hard to go over. But I would say with Litmaps, it's just important to go look at the upgrade to Pro button and see what your pricing is on your screen, because we do country pricing. So it's really hard for me to say what your pricing will be unless I know what country you live in and I can check what our pricing is there. So that's the first thing is just go in, just see it. It will tell you immediately, hey, this is your monthly price and this is a country discount if you have one. And you cannot combine discounts. So oftentimes a country discount might be like 50%. And so you cannot use also this 20% on it. You're already getting this country discount. They tend to be much more dramatic because it's parity pricing, because in various countries, obviously um, the whole system is different. So that's my main suggestion. However, if you're say in the United States or New Zealand, so I'm in New Zealand, I would get 20% off this pricing, which is $12.50 a month for monthly pricing or $10 a month for annual. So anyways, it works out to at the lowest like $8 a month for New Zealand and US. But please double check that for yourself to get the accurate thing for you. Um, And actually, that might be a question for you, Suzanne, or rather a comment that someone's offering that they can import a PDF into Obsidian and then using a plugin called PDF++. So perhaps is that something familiar for you with Paperpile?
I am not aware of that plugin.
No worries. Cool. And someone, James also asked, does that just export the annotations?
Yes,
Mhm.
just the annotations and any sticky note you've made. So so annotations in our case includes highlights and sticky notes that are
Mm-hmm.
text.
Cool. Great. And someone here is asking about the promo code. So I'll drop them both in here. So what PaperPiles is PaperPile 20. And the other one, I'll double check, is Lit Review 20.
Yes, PaperPile 20 is valid until July 31st. So basically, if you start your 30-day free trial anytime between now and then, it just make sure to then, if you do decide to go ahead with PaperPile, make sure to use it before July 31st.
Right. And since we have about 5-10 minutes or so until we need to close up the webinar, you're welcome to keep posting questions, but we'd love to ask you also a question in return, which is what perhaps was the best takeaway or the one feature or the one idea or even the one technique that you're really interested in trying after this 1 hour session here. Because at the beginning, everyone shared these really great on-point challenges that we're all having, like searching for literature is really can be hard, or knowing when you've saturated the field, knowing when you're done, trying to stay organized. These are such prevalent issues. So after this session, what's just the one thing that you found really useful, or the one thing you'd like to try after learning a little bit more about Litmaps, about PaperPile, and about the literature review process as a whole, and trying to optimize that using these tools? It would be wonderful to hear your thoughts. So we have one response from James offering that, yeah, the one thing to change or to try out is using tags to organize how he thinks in Litmaps. That's great. Like just trying to categorize our work can just save so much time for the future, and as well as helping us to visualize things that we just can't see when it comes down to lists. And then he also wants to use the same tags to organize his thinking in Paperpile. And that's fantastic. Great. Well, we can give it perhaps, 10, 20 more seconds or a minute or so and see if anyone else has any further questions or comments. And if not, we will slowly wrap it up so everyone can get on with their day and hopefully start to dive into these tools or whatever research you're doing in more detail. So feel free to leave any final questions or comments in this final minute. Otherwise, we'll soon conclude this workshop.
Yes, I think one of the questions was trying to identify important papers or like how do you figure out? I'm trying to remember the exact question. Maybe I
Mm.
can find it. It was towards the beginning. Um, yeah, like trying to decide what's relevant and what isn't. Again, like there's many ways of trying to find these important papers, but like again, Litmaps like highlights these papers that have a lot of citations. But also just generally you can see whether papers are reviews. Reviews usually will give a will review the state of a field and are often a good starting point when you really don't know anything. Um, so those might be ones that are good, like feeding or
Mm.
seed papers for your lit map. And then another thought as well is look at the journal titles. So again, your advice if you're a student, your advisor should tell you what are the most important journals in your field. And because it's not necessarily always about impact factor. And some fields are just don't have their journals don't have high impact factors. But your advisor should be able to tell you what's important and which journals should you be keeping an eye on. And again, when you're say looking at papers in lit maps and you're trying to identify is this one now something I should read, if it's from one of the more important journals in your field, then that would be a signal that you should.
Mm.
And then another thought about just reading papers too, there's different ways of reading papers. So, the annotation method I showed, that's useful, can be particularly useful if you're reading a paper very deeply. It's something your research is going to build upon. But it also can be useful just if you're quickly scanning a paper and just trying to find its general findings. So again, there is like some papers will require deep reading, some will require a skim and kind of getting more a quick overview of what it was about. Um, maybe it's something sort of tangential, but you still need to refer to it in your literature review or in your manuscript or whatever you're writing. So yes, sort of being careful to distinguish between the types of reading you do need to do.
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
yes, it is hard to kind of stay on top of all of the reading and trying to understand what's important and then
Mm.
trying to make connections between things. And hopefully
Mm.
this outline document idea might be of use to people as well.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a fantastic summary. Yeah, and it perhaps also depends where you are in the process, and that's kind of why sometimes no matter perhaps the tools, but it's really about perhaps a strategy of like identifying important papers, like say at the beginning of the process, how Suzanne mentioned, review papers, salient, top level works, and then what becomes important later depends on what we're looking at. So you're getting more niche in your topic, you're trying to find the most relevant things, then yeah, using finding connected papers, filtering on specific things, and the journal idea is fantastic using these journals. So there's also journal filters and litmaps. So there's a lot there. That's a wonderful summary. Um, yeah, so I think that about concludes all the questions we're getting. So I think we will basically wrap it up here at this point and want to give a very, very warm thank you to everyone for your participation and for your thoughtful questions and comments and feedback in the chat. We will be sending out an email after the event with, there's a recording link as well as these different promo codes and whatever resources can help you out. And a very warm thank you, of course, to Suzanne for sharing deeply about Paperpile and providing a really great overview of everything we can do there. So yes, thank you everyone so much for joining.
Thank you, Marina, for hosting.
Absolutely. Thank you all, and hopefully we'll see you the next workshop, event, webinar, whatever. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.